Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Welcome back. We got another episode of The Strange Road. I'm your host, Mikey. As always, riding shotgun, Bub, the co-host. And we got Stoner and Disbrow and Master Control, crushing it with the audio and video. Say hello to everybody, guys. People just love that Master Control cam. I love it.
I love it.
So, guys, switching it up a little bit. I feel like we haven't done a podcast episode like this in a little bit. We've been kind of all over the map, but this is going to really pumped for this one.
We've been crossing off every little square on the bingo card of Strange lately.
Right.
And we just finally happened to land on this one.
Yep, absolutely. But before we hop into that, you guys can follow us at The Strange Road on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We got the Facebook group, Strange Road Hitchhikers, rocking and rolling. If you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe, share that video.
Yep.
If you enjoy the show.
Rate, review.
Exactly. And as always, we love to keep our live streams and our premieres completely ad-free for you guys. Super stickers and super chats are right there available for you.
Yep.
It's a great way to support the show and continue all the operations and things we're trying to do down here. Any help is much appreciated.
Very much so.
And for all you guys listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere where you're listening, leave us that 5-star review.
Yep.
Shout us out, say what's up. And, I think, unless I was forgetting anything.
No, good to go.
You're always my reminder. I think we're good to go.
I think we're good to go. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Let's introduce our guest for tonight. Please welcome author, researcher, and YouTuber Will from Incredible History. What's happening, Will? How you doing tonight, man?
Mikey, Bub, thanks for having me on. I'm doing well.
Yes.
This is the first podcast ever on The Strange Road. Dude. I've been a fan of podcasts too, so I'm excited about it. And I'm ready to get weird. So
yes,
I got some.
Dude, that's great. We love it. I'm glad we're your first podcast. So this is the first time you've been a guest on any podcast?
It's the first time I've ever been a guest on any podcast. I've done a number of interviews myself on my channel, Incredible History. Talked to Mike from Wandering Wolf Productions. I actually not too long ago. And then several others that are in the pipeline, but I've never actually been on someone else's podcast. And you've been talking for a little bit, and you all were the ones I wanted to come on to first, just because I've been a follower. Some of your episodes have been really interesting. The one about the crop circle at Serpent Mound, I knew, everything there was to know about that area. I'd never even heard of that. Right by that site. That blew my mind. That's where I got hooked. And so, I'm excited to be here.
Oh, so the Jeffrey Wilson Crop Circle live podcast that we did at Serpent Mound that weekend got you.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, I just had never heard of that before. So,
well, to be honest,
it flies under a lot of people's radar. I remember growing up as a kid hearing about it, but I've always heard for years that it was fake.
Wait, do you mean the Serpent Mound or the Crop Circle was flying under the radar? The Crop Circle. The Crop Circle was 2012, right?
2003.
It's the 20th, it's the 20th. That's
20th
right.
anniversary is August 23rd of this year. Yeah,
that actual episode and recording that actually just changed my whole perception on crop circles, because Jeff is so knowledgeable about them. And there were actually a few questions that I asked him. He said, the first one that I said was really funny, because he goes, the guy that started researching crop circles, that's what he said. And I was like, I don't even know what I asked. Like, I just was asking like a basic thing, but it's something that I guess when you look at crop circles after a while, people just stop thinking about. They just kind of look at it a different facet. I don't know how to put it, but yeah, he kind of opened my perception that there's more to crop circles. And that most people just take whatever they think of it as, it's a design or whatever. But
like the music scales, the diatonic scale of music notes, that blew my mind. But, those guys, again, those are just Jeffrey and Tom Johnson and a lot of the people regionally here in Ohio that have been doing research and amazing work forever, just trying to get the word out about them too. So, Jeffrey being kind of unknown to a lot of people outside of Ohio, but if you're interested in this stuff, you definitely know who he is. But even the crop circle is Serpent Mound's one topic, but that one phenomena that just happened during that week in 2003, with Jeffrey, it's both of his worlds combined.
Yeah.
Crop circles, and then became obsessed with Serpent Mound and ended up moving in next door and marrying Delcy, the woman that found the crop circle. It's just an amazing story. So we're trying to shed more light on that story because it is one of the most wild stories I've ever heard of in any kind of paranormal circle.
Yeah. And like, even if, people say, well, these are elaborate hoaxes, people have done this before. Mm-hmm. Well, people have done it before in like a controlled setting where they wanted to show that they could do it before. How could all these keep happening without someone getting caught? And I'm sure people have been caught before. I don't know. But like, the Serpent Mound one, or the one near Serpent Mound, that's not far from the highway. Mm-hmm. How is that happening without somebody getting caught? And that's a very elaborate one. It would take time and effort, and not just one person. Tools, there'd be all kinds of stuff involved with it. Very strange.
Absolutely.
Well, and even in that crop circle, what I thought was funny was the images that they took when they showed, this is where Jeff and the other researchers entered their points of entry. And he's like, you can see the one guy that was real excited because he went and cut right through the middle, right? So if there were hoaxers out there making it and doing it, they were either the most careful, ballerina, nimbly bimbly out there and, tippy toes. But then there were points in that circle where Jeff, says it in the episode 2 here. He's like, from this point in the crop circle to get to that point is like 18 or 20 feet. Mm-hmm. You're not getting there without making damage in the other parts of the field, and especially in the soybean field too, because of the, more delicate nature of it.
Right.
Yeah. Especially on a soybean field, like especially in there, that's a whole nother, ball game right there compared to corn or whatever, even wheat.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the soybean field being that unique, which again, you always think of wheat or, that being when you think of crop circles. But to hear that soybean was so unique and it just so happened it's that rare.
Who knew there was a rhyme or reason to crop circles being picky about what crop they made a circle in?
Yeah.
I wonder if you ever get like, some crops that like feel a little discriminated because they're not having UFOs coming and putting awesome designs on us.
Right.
How come they're always cornfield?
Oh man, that's great. Will's already a lot of fun. We had a great call with you here earlier in the week and just had a great time. But I really want to hop into it, man, because you've been the research. First of all, you got a book coming out. You have a book that just came out, and so I want to talk about your book and kind of how you got interested in creating Incredible History, the YouTube channel, and everything you're doing over there. Because we respect everything that you're doing.
Absolutely.
But you're not just sitting at a computer watching YouTube videos. You're getting out in the field, man. You're doing the research and connecting a lot of dots. So tell us a little bit about where we can find your research, where we can find the book, and then we can kind of hop into how you got what you're doing with Incredible History, and tell us about the book.
Yeah, so the book here is just a little shameless plug. This is Enigmatic North America, Legends, Oddities, and Controversial History. This picture that I took right here, that's at Sego Canyon in Utah. And it's one of the most, I guess you could say, famous pictures in regard to the whole ancient aliens in the American Southwest area. Not pictures, but famous pictographs in that case. And so the way this got started is during the pandemic. I was actually working out in Hawaii during the pandemic and came home for a spring break right when everything shut down. And was in the house I think I was in Denver, Colorado when that happened with my brother. And I was in the house for a while and was getting a little stir crazy. And I decided at that point, I am going to go buy a drone and I'm going to go take advantage of all of these sites being completely empty right now. And the first place I went to was Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, which is wild. I've been there 6 times now, and I'm probably going to keep going back. And I went out there and started just kind of doing some drone photography just outside of the boundary. It's actually a national monument, and you're not allowed to fly drones in the national monument. And then just explored like I don't want to say every inch of that place because it's huge, but as much as I could. I was going all the way out to ruins that you'd never heard of before. And then I kept that trip going. I started going to places out on like BLM land, like Bureau of Land Management, out in Utah. Actually, my background right here with these handprints, not a lot of people know these exist. These are 1,000-year-old handprints, Anasazi handprints that you can find out at Monarch Cave in Utah. And you have to drive like 5 miles per hour on a road that most cars shouldn't be on to even get to it. But I just started doing a lot of these things. I like to car camp. I like to go and do, long backpacking hikes throughout the desert or the mountains, just looking for stuff. And before I knew it, I realized I had, quite a bit of footage accumulated in the American Southwest. At Chimney Rock, Colorado is another spot that I got to. And then I did the mound builders. I went to Serpent Mound, went down to Poverty Point. Pretty soon I found myself in Mexico, documenting a lot of these sites. Next thing I knew, I was taking like a long boat ride down the Guatemala-Mexico border to go document a site called Piedras Negras. And I kind of realized like, hey, I kind of started the YouTube channel, but it was kind of in like a beta test mode almost, like, how do I want this to be? And during that time, I was just kind of going over all the different things I'd heard of down there, all the legends, the stories that different guides had told me. I was also, in between all this, interviewing a lot of people with very strange, and in some cases, some pretty famous UFO contact and stories. And so I had all this weird, accumulation of weird stuff, photos, videos, interviews of things that were enigmatic, which is why I named it that, Enigmatic North America. And I decided, you know what, I'd like to try to make a photo book out of this. And so I started writing, and I started, gathering all my photos. And I think this book has over 200 plus photos of all the different sites that I've been to. And it's just full of detailed information about very strange history. I try to stay very agnostic throughout the entire book. That's kind of just how I am. But part of being agnostic on stuff like this is also not being quick to jump to the "it was a hoax" conclusion, right? The whole "it was a hoax" thing seems to be a magic wand for a lot of skeptics. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with being skeptical, but I'm of the opinion that if something is being accused, or someone's accusing someone, especially like an individual, of performing a hoax, there needs to be like conclusive evidence, like very clear evidence. And if there's not, then yeah, you can maybe still weigh both sides of the story and come to your own conclusion. But that other side definitely needs to have their story heard. And so that's kind of the approach I take throughout this book. I'm sure my bias slips through several times. And we can talk about that a little bit on some of them. Like one thing we're going to talk about today probably is Hueyatlaco down in Puebla, Mexico, which is where these 250,000-year-old artifacts, human artifacts, were supposedly discovered. They were discovered. Whether they were 250,000 years is the question. And I'm kind of biased on that. I've done enough research on that to kind of think that it's true, that there was some type of hominid in North America 250,000 years ago. But otherwise, I really do try to tell both sides of the story. And so that's how I got started. What I'm trying to do is, it's really just a creative outlet for me. And it's turned into this book. Each chapter I'm doing an episode on my YouTube channel for. So we actually, today I just released chapter 2, episode 2, The Mystery of the Western Message Petroglyphs, on my YouTube and Twitter. And then, I got a TikTok and an Instagram where I'm doing these reels for each topic that's kind of in there. And I'll be doing a reel or just a little short 1-minute video every day for the next 60 days is the plan. And, so if you're not like much about reading the actual book, just go binge watch. I'm going to weird stuff out. And, the 1-minute videos have been pretty popular. And they're fun to make. Like that's actually, I've been very hesitant to get on TikTok. You hear about the data harvesting and all that. I joined the dark side. I decided to get a TikTok, and it's actually been a lot of fun. So
yeah,
that's how I got.
Exactly. I mean, that's where a lot of the engagement is. And there's so many history guys on TikTok that are doing great work like yourself. I mean, there's a lot, a couple years ago, TikTok's like this dancing, people just dance on it. But
Goofy
here in the
stuff,
last year, there's a lot of guys like you that are throwing out some great informative stuff. So yeah, keep that up. I mean, we're on TikTok as well. It's fun. It's where a lot of the engagement is. So yeah, absolutely. Keep going with that, man, because you got to have some good stuff, some informative stuff on there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Stoner takes care of most of our TikTok. But I mean, there is a lot of content on there that wasn't on there just a few years ago. Like just the kind of shifting of the landscape of, what people can use to get their message out or their content out anymore. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we want to go into the footprints too deep yet.
Oh, not yet. I'd like to. We have kind of an order of this deck.
Oh, you have. That's right.
And I know in the past I've trying not to like jump all over the place. But we've got some fantastic images. I mean, if we want to hop into that now, Will, I think the more time we have to go through all this stuff, the better.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, might as well jump through that stuff, right? And then we can use whatever time we have left and just get out. I mean, it'll be
yeah.
Go ahead,
for sure.
Go ahead. I'm excited.
Yeah, Akambaro here, correct? Is that what you all are talking about?
Yeah, this the slide deck here.
Yeah. So okay,
sure
this one,
which one I'm on right now?
You're on the little dinosaur figurines right there.
Did I go too far?
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
There's
I got it now.
One.
Awesome.
It was a little hint. So this is the Museo Waldemar Julsrud. So this is a museum in Acambaro, Mexico. Before we get started with this, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. Sure. I'm not a young Earth creationist. What we're about to talk about is a very bizarre, I don't know if you want to call it, we'll call it an oddity, not an anomaly. We'll call it an oddity.
Sure.
Because maybe there's a explanation for it. However, that logical explanation, why I wrote about this, hasn't been discovered yet, in my opinion. And so it's still a mystery, in my humble opinion. If you read on Wikipedia, no, it's been debunked as a hoax. But basically what you have here is in this little museum in Acambaro, Mexico, you have 32,000 figurines, many of them looking like dinosaurs, that were supposedly uncovered over a long period of time in the 1940s through the 1950s in Acambaro, Mexico, in different excavations around the area in a place called El Toro Mountain. And I hereard about this, and here's this guy right here on the screen right here is Julsrud, Waldemar Julsrud. He was a German immigrant that was a businessman that came to the area, and he was very well respected. Even the people that claim that this is a hoax had good things to say about him. No one pointed fingers at this guy. He was the first one to find a figurine sticking out of the sand, basically at El Toro Mountain. El Toro Mountain used to be at the base of an ancient lake. And so it's like a sandy beach where this was found. And we're going to talk about why that's important to know in a second. But he found these figurines, and he had a worker with him named Tiniero. And he said, hey, let's find some more of these. Waldemar had already been relatively famous in the area for helping excavate some other ancient sites around the Guanajuato, Michoacan border area. And so he had a very strong interest in this. And so the next day, Tiniero comes back, and he's just got like a whole bunch more. Tiniero said, hey, there's more artifacts. I've found more. He continues to go and get them. There was a monetary deal. I think he told Tiniero he'd pay him a peso for each one he could find. And so a lot of people point to that part as the hoax. Tiniero ends up getting the finger pointed at him for this. But long story short, after years of collecting this stuff, you now have 32,000 figurines that are in this museum, probably 4,000 on display. And then she took me to the back room. This is the director of the museum here, where everything else is stored. It's not just dinosaur-looking figures that they found. There's figurines of artifacts that look Egyptian, that look like they have old world significance to them. And, I hired a guide here because this is actually like cartel territory right here, especially this part of, but yeah, the Guanajuato Michoacan border is like, it's quite a bit dodgy, actually. Acambaro itself, a shout out to the people of Acambaro. I actually really loved it there, but it's a little dodgy. And so we go down there, and he was just as mind blown as I was. Now, I was trying to stay, agnostic this entire time. But how I had found out about this, there's a guy named Charles Hapgood. A lot of you might be familiar with him. He's the one that gets into the Earth. I think, is it Earth crustaceal theory? Do you all know what I'm talking about?
I know the name.
Yep.
Is it disbrow? Basically, that there are these cyclical cataclysms that happen due to the Earth's crust. He's kind of where all that started. Like, I think it's what's that movie? There's an apocalyptic, like, a movie where this happens. That's actually based off of his work, Charles Hapgood. Well, he goes down there and studies this, and he quickly finds out that there's more to the story than it's just a hoax, because people were already starting to say this is a hoax. He starts interviewing everybody. He interviews Tiniero. He interviews Waldrod, and he finally figures out, okay, the best way to go about this is we need to find somebody trustworthy that lives in the direct area, the 10 acres where all these are being found. And we need to dig directly through their living room and try to see if there's anything, that we can find. If we find something, that would.
Oh. Really?
Yeah, for sure. And so they find a deputy, or actually, I think the chief of police. This is all according to Hapgood's book, The Mystery at Acambaro. Really good book. You can get it on ebook. And they start digging through the living room, and according to Hapgood, they find fragments of similar pieces. I don't think they found anything whole, but the exact same composition, the same stuff that they had been finding in the same place, they found after digging through this person's living room down into the foundation, through the foundation and into the earth. And so Hapgood all of a sudden says, well, the mystery is still here. Eventually there's a guy named Charles de Peso, very famous archaeologist, that comes down there. And a lot of people said he came down there with a mission to debunk this. He claims that he took Tiniero took him, the worker took him to go find some more of these. And that Tiniero showed him, basically dug up a cache that he'd already previously buried. And so he immediately said that this was a hoax. Hapgood says that was a huge misunderstanding, that Tiniero often did this at the end of a long workday. Anything that he hadn't collected, he would rebury, and he just didn't necessarily know what was being asked of him. And so there's a lot of mystery behind that. These things have been radiocarbon dated 3 different times. The first time was led by Charles Hapgood, and I think the oldest date was something like 4,000 BC. The youngest was 1,100 something BC. Then it gets dated by the University of Pennsylvania in the 70s, like decades later. And they come to the conclusion that no, they did it incorrectly. These are more modern. These were probably created in the 20th century. The guy that writes Charles Hapgood's forward to his book on the modern day upgraded version says, no, you all did it incorrectly. I'm going to do it. He does it again, comes to the conclusion that these have been created in 1000 BC. So once again, there's just this back and forth, who's correct on this. And all I know is the only thing I really believe on this is I have a hard time believing that if it was a hoax, that Tiniero was responsible. Hapgood says in his book, Tiniero was like a 4th grade educated laborer in the area. And we're talking about, not that he wouldn't be capable of maybe doing it on a small scale. This is 32,000 figurines that are stored at this place. The amount of energy, even so monetary wise, just the amount of energy it would have taken to fire these, this would have taken years.
That's what doesn't make any sense. Like when they say it's a hoax, like you said earlier, like that burden of proof on like, show me how this makes any sense to hoax this. Like,
I mean, look how weird they are. Just the ones that we have up here. I mean, for those folks that are just listening, our show is always available on YouTube. We'll do our best to kind of explain. But Will, if you can kind of just walk through some of these figurines. I mean, you've taken some amazing photos, and I'm guessing a bunch of these are in your book as well. But just look at the detail, and just they're weird looking things. So, you'd have to get some artist to be in on it. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Exactly. And not only one artists in the time frame that we're talking about, and it would have to be not a secret. It would have to be out. I mean, it's 32,000 of these. So if they were more modern, I don't think it was like 1940s. I think we're talking like maybe something happened in the 1800s or early. I don't know, but I feel bad for old Tinny Arrow. Rest in peace. Everyone involved in this is dead now. But I feel bad for him, because he's been labeled the hoaxer on this, and I just don't think it's possible. Now you'll see on these, some people say, well, they don't look like your typical artifacts, like there's no patina on them, right? Like a kind of like an aged surface. And Hapgood explains that that's because they were found in 4 feet of sand, and that patina does not, that doesn't happen in sand. That's just Hapgood's take. Hapgood probably had his own bias. He obviously wrote a book about this. But it's a pretty good point. Now, here's where it got interesting. And this is information I don't think anyone knows about until I went down there. This is a relatively new discovery. So I asked the director at the Acambaro Museum, at the Museo Waldemar Jolschred Museum, is it possible to go back to El Toro Mountain these days and like continue to try to find something? Because everyone involved in this is dead now. So if they're burying artifacts, I guess it's possible that they left some buried, but everyone's involved. And she goes, oh, no, we can't do that. But we found more in 2008. So as recent as 2008, there's been more artifacts found. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to take her word for that. I do have her on film saying that in Spanish. We filmed the whole thing. I was on the museum's Facebook page. You can find me out there somewhere on the Museo, Waldemar Jolschred Facebook page. But she tells me this, that as late as 2008, asked her, where are these? Are they in the museum? They said, no, everything that's in the museum was Waldemar's collection. Since that wasn't Waldemar's collection, I don't really know where those are, but they did find more in 2008. Where those are, I don't know. That was according to her.
So why did she say that you couldn't go back out there and dig for more?
The entire place is covered with like houses now.
Oh.
I don't think to have like an actual excavation. If you go, I don't know if you all kept this photo, but I actually did go. This was dodgy. This is kind of in like the favela of Acambaro, but I went to El Toro Mountain just to kind of take a picture of like the area I'm pretty sure it would be after doing some sleuthing. And yeah, you can just see it's covered in construction, and
we do actually have that photo. I think it's a little further down, but I can kind of we'll eventually reach that photo. I think I know what you're talking about. Now you mentioned some Egyptian style artifacts. Is this what you're talking about?
And if you read that description on the left side, I'm not fluent in Spanish, but they actually like describe it as like an Atlantean artifact or something. Read that. And once again, I put this out online one time and people said, the Mayans did have stuff like this. And that's probably true. But one of my interests is this idea of like a cross-cultural connection between the Atlantic, right? Like the North American and European and African, and even on the other side, Pacific, just one big worldwide knowledge of each other. A lot of my content in this book actually revolves around that. So I thought that this was interesting, but once again, I'm staying, I guess I have a healthy degree of skepticism about all this. The idea that they knew what dinosaurs was back then is pretty wild. So the title of this chapter is And it's only because I didn't want people to accuse me of being a young Earth creationist. And shout out to all the young Earth creationists out there. You do you. Like, I'm not hating at all.
Right.
I have plenty of friends. I just am not one. But the title is, Did Some Dinosaurs Survive the KT Extinction Event? And Hapgood goes into detail in his book. Apparently down in Big Bend, they found a pterodon, which is like a large pterodactyl. They found a pterodon skeleton in like the geology of an area that's 40 million years old, which is like well after the KT extinction event. Like that would have been like 40 million years later. That's kind of debated as to whether that's 40 million years old, that geological layer that I'm talking about. And then, of course, you have the legends out in the Congo, I believe. Have you all ever heard about I can't remember how to pronounce it, but the Brontosaurus down there. So there's just all kinds of weird legends that Hapgood in this book talks about that, once again, I'm pretty skeptical of. However, I can't outright call this a hoax because after like weighing the evidence, it seems to me that they just pointed the finger at poor Tiniero. And, I have trouble believing that old Tiniero fired 32,000 of these.
Jeez.
The time frame.
Right. That's a lot of kiln work, man. Not just that, the sculpting, but to even get those where they're...
Just to get the resources.
Yeah.
The materials.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big opera. 36,000 or whatever. No, man.
A factory of workers.
I can't bake you 36,000 cookies. Like, sure as hell can't make you 36,000 sculptures. Like, geez, right?
Like this one is not really Egyptian. This statue here that we have up, it's very unique. It doesn't seem Mayan. It doesn't seem European. It's just very odd. But then you have your little inscription here that's just a dinosaur carving on this person's dress or tunic or whatever it is that they're wearing. I mean, that's odd, man. And
if I'm being unbiased here, this one right here, I'm looking at this and I go, okay, it's hard to date inscriptions. It's hard to tell, but like just, knee-jerk reaction, inscription looks a little newer than 6,000 years, right? However, you go to places like the Anthropology Museum in Mexico City where you can find artifacts that are 2,000, 3,000 years old. And actually, some of them are just as well as preserved as this.
Right.
So it's one of those things I go back and forth on.
Yeah.
Even in the book, I just get a little cheeky, actually. I'm not even like being serious about it, but I talk about like, well, I don't know, like... Maybe I don't know if you all have heard like of Mind at Large. Maybe they were tripping psychedelics and they had some moment of clarity of like the past and the future, and they understood that like dinos. And I'm joking in the book, like it's kind of a joke, but it's because I don't think Tiniero hoaxed this. That's the conclusion that the experts have came to, Charles de Peso, and I just don't think he did it. I also have a hard time believing that humans lived with dinosaurs back then. So, what else am I supposed to do other than speculate about weird stuff like psychedelics or Mind at Large? So it's quite the mystery.
Yeah, and you have visionary states of, you can explain away probably a lot of petroglyphs in New Mexico and all over the world where you have these extraterrestrial looking things, but it's like you take psychedelics, you see some pretty weird shit, especially DMT or some kind of like really visionary substance.
Or whatever ceremonies they were doing back in those times.
Exactly. So, to say that ETs are coming down and maybe that is what happened, but they could also be in some kind of visionary state and some ecstatic state where, they're creating all of this art that seems interdimensional or completely fantastical. Maybe that's what this is.
I don't know. It's cool artwork. I mean, it's really cool. The one on the left, that statue has a very funny face on next to the gold one there. I don't know what it was wearing.
Yeah. But this one's interesting. This looks like two dinosaurs or something that are kind of embracing each other.
Yeah, and one has its neck in the other's mouth, so he's biting.
Oh,
like
I see.
Probably could have got a better angle there for sure. Yeah, I think there's another one. There's like a little alien riding a dinosaur if you keep going eventually.
Really? Is this your photo of the favela?
This is, the El Toro Mountain. And so me and Daniel Comparte was my driver and my guide for this. Usually I do these things solo when I go to Mexico, but for this one I decided I needed a Spanish speaker. And he told me, hey, no filming until we get up there. This place is dodgy. This is like not the good part of town. So we went up there, took some real quick pics. I got an awesome drone shot of Acambaro, and we got out of there. I didn't really have time to like look around, mainly because it would have been like finding a needle in a haystack. Where'd they actually dig on this, right? It's just 10 acres. So this was what we could do right here.
Cool. That's wild.
This one's interesting.
Wow.
For sure. Out of all the carvings, that was the one that was the most interesting to me. Yeah. You mentioned New Mexico petroglyphs earlier. I don't know if you have this photo in the lineup, but Dr. John Ruskamp, who's a friend of mine, he's featured in my chapter about Chinese petroglyphs in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is going to be that's going to be a dynamite episode. It's already made a lot of people mad. I got an archaeologist on Twitter for even talking about it. But he sent me a picture of what looks like a stegosaurus out in the New Mexico. It's a petroglyph of it looks like a stegosaurus, probably just a poorly drawn porcupine, out north of Santa Fe and between Santa Fe and Taos. And so there are some interesting petroglyphs that you can find in pictographs in America that there's lore behind. I don't know if you have those, if we could pull those up or not, but some of them have been let's see here. But yeah, there's the one with the alien riding the dinosaur.
Yeah, this one? Oh, what? Yeah, let's just show that one real quick. What?
That's different. Let me hitch a ride, bro.
Man, alien. That's what looks like it, you know. And then there's all the boxes, 32,000 of them. What? Not boxes, 1,000 figurines stored in there. This is just one section of their storage room. And I don't even think I got the full height of these. I think it goes up a little bit more. And this is me on their YouTube channel. This is when she told me that they found more in 2008.
Look at your face. What?
So this right here, this is called the Black Dragon. So Black Dragon, Utah is amazing. It's out on BLM land out near the Green River, Utah. Beautiful landscape. Absolutely amazing. It's called the Mexican Mountains out there. Not a lot of people know about them. You see these handprints right here. There's actually more like this in this area. As I was walking to this, I saw all kinds of, I guess these would be Fremont handprints. So the Fremont is a Puebloan group that was just north of the Anasazi. And you see all kinds out there. And I'll have a video on that eventually. But eventually I got to this right here. This is called the Black Dragon. A lot of people, what do you all think it looks like? Like first glance, if we're talking dinosaurs here.
I mean, God, I don't know.
I'm not real sure which direction I should be like taking it. If it goes left, right, if it's looking straight on it. I mean, I see the feet, right, or the legs.
I think that this is a pterodactyl, and that you have the wings, and that on the top there where the head would be, it's looking to, I guess, our right.
Right.
This one has been this one's been debunked. I know that word's kind of like overused, debunked, but there's actually a good explanation here. Those feet right there that you see is one entity, and then the head is actually another entity standing on top of that person's back. When you take this and put it in Photoshop and really do the saturation and all that stuff, it's very clearly two different entities. And so I just kind of threw that in there because, you know, sometimes some of these petroglyphs, you know, people have their own interpretation, and there's usually a pretty good logical explanation for it.
Yeah. We saw some in Montana a couple summers ago. We went, backpack camping, whatever, car camping with our dog, my wife and I, and she took us down like a dirt gravel road for about 45, 50 minutes to get to, you know, some of these spots. And like you're saying, you might see a spot, but it makes me think of like, you know, even Van Gogh and painters, they used to reuse canvases. So maybe even sometimes on these walls, you know, you only had so much canvas spot, or if something kind of got overlaid or images maybe mixed together somehow. Those are clearly not mixed together. Those are great. Look how crisp that is.
Yeah,
this is in Canada. And I was glad I could put this in my book because as much as I love my title, Enigmatic North America, I didn't get to go to Canada, unfortunately, because that was all during the COVID lockdowns and it was impossible for me to get to Canada. So I didn't make it, but this is near Lake Superior in Canada. And I got this off of Wikimedia Commons, which is an awesome place to get photos of things that you maybe would want to use for like a book. And yeah, this was created by Native Americans out there. Clearly not a buffalo, right? It's got like spikes on the back. The explanation for this is that this is a mythical being or mythical animal that the locals, basically the local Native American population, had combined with a lynx, so like a wildcat. It's like a wildcat mixed with other local animals and is a mythical being. Some people, though, think it looks like a dinosaur, which is why I put it in there. But if you ask the actual Native Americans in that area, they have a name for this, and it's a being that's like a mix between a wildcat and other animals within that area. And you got some serpents with feet below them if you look a little close.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Serpent iconography everywhere. And look at that.
Is this the porcupine?
This is outside of Albuquerque. This is definitely New Mexico. Those rocks look very familiar.
This is north of Santa Fe, in between, right by the Rio Grande River, in between Taos and Santa Fe, and awesome petroglyph site out there. And yeah, looks kind of like a stegosaurus. Some people think, right? Really, a lot of people think that. Whether it is or not, probably not. To me, it looks like it could be a poorly drawn porcupine. I say poorly, but like, could I do better? Probably not.
Yeah, on a rock. Yeah, exactly.
Could I do better? Probably not.
Oh man,
give him some credit here. This one is really interesting. So this is out at what's it called? Like Bridges National Monument in Utah. Beautiful place, southeast Utah. And the Natural Bridges National Monument. And you go underneath this incredible bridge, and there's all these pictographs and petroglyphs down there. And this one, I wish I could control the pointer, but maybe we could this one, according to people on the internet, looks like a brontosaurus or a long neck. So you can see maybe the head would be, to me, it doesn't really, but there's all kinds of people that have gotten really excited about this one. You can see the head on the right side. You see right in the middle is the pictograph. Can you see that?
Yep.
What I'm talking about? And then, I guess it looks like a brontosaurus. So I went and took pictures of all these just to kind of explain in my book that, these ideas of dinosaurs living with people have been around for a while. But I kind of give a whole explanation as to why all these petroglyphs and pictographs probably aren't dinosaurs, right? And same thing with Acambaro. Like I said, the mystery of Acambaro with all the figurines. I'm not telling anyone that people lived with dinosaurs. I'm really trying to get across that I don't think Tiniero made 32,000 figurines. I have like I don't even know the guy. I think he's been dead for like 3 decades, but like I just feel for old Tiniero. I feel like he's been wrongfully accused, and I feel like we need to like clean his name from the internet. We need to like stamp it away. Tiniero was a good guy, and he was just doing what he was told. But yeah, so that's the dinosaur topic. That's the rabbit hole I went down at the mystery of Acambaro.
I love it.
That's awesome.
I mean, but that, we talked about this in the call the other day, and like Angkor Wat, the stele with the Stegosaurus relief carving. So it's not like it's relegated to one location. I mean, we've heard this before in different locations throughout the globe. We talked about, or you mentioned even over in Africa and somewhere in the Congo, the like brontosaurus type still living dinosaur. Like it's still, man, I remember those stories when I was a kid. They still talk about it.
Well, there's a fish that they discovered. Somebody caught a fish, decades ago that was alive before the dinosaurs.
A coelacanth.
Is that what it's called?
They're called a coelacanth. Yep, they thought they were extinct.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's amazing. It just shows you, I mean, that survived, and it hasn't really evolved much since. Like, it's been like the same thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, yeah, what you were talking about, if anybody's interested, if you just put an Angkor Wat dinosaur, yeah, there's a relief. And some people think that it was created more recently, but like, I don't know, how would they do that, without it being obvious? It looks like Stegosaurus.
Yeah. I mean, they had carved off, like, say, it was more like they would carve off whatever theology was ruling the temple structures at the time. If it was Hindu or if it was Buddhist or this or that, they would like deface the effigies of like whatever religion was on it, but they left all the other stuff mostly, and like the history that was etched into it. It was just the pillars where it was more of like the like symbolic prayers of the deities. Those would get defaced, but everything else was kind of kept as a historical map, as far as I understood it. That's a cool picture. Whoa, flint mapping.
Clear. There would be no one more happy to find a logical explanation to this than me. Like, I actually am just fine with continuing to believe that humans and dinosaurs didn't live together. I just think it's weird, right? It is weird. The Akambaro mystery is extremely weird. No one's been able to explain it in a good way. Charles de Peso, probably a good man. I've heard he's a really good archaeologist. I don't know if he's still alive or not. He didn't put much effort into his debunking, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you a quick question, and this is just kind of it's kind of in the same vein, but a little bit off the cuff. But recently they're talking now of like, oh, hey, the universe isn't 13 billion years old; it's 26 billion years old. We lose billions of dollars, and this is off topic as well. But what I'm saying here is some of these numbers that might matter, we don't really care too much. We fudged these by billions of, or maybe light years in travel. What I'm getting at is, do we really understand some of these scales we're using? Do we really understand, like, even what you're saying, like, it doesn't make sense to you that maybe we lived along dinosaurs, but what if we're really misconstruing some of this information?
Also, what is like the definition of extinction? Because birds got here somehow, right? They evolved from dinosaurs. Something survived, right? Like, what's your definition of like what extinction is? Did they all just die at once whenever that KT extinction event happened? No. Otherwise, there wouldn't be like things that are still clearly evolved from whatever that was. And so, it's fun to keep an open mind about these things without maybe going too far off the deep end. And yeah, you made a good point. That's actually news to me, that from like last week, the universe is maybe 20 billion years old now.
Yep.
Is that where yeah, that's crazy. That's new. I'm still processing that one, because
basically twice as old as we ever thought it was.
And the human timeline keeps getting pushed back with the new cave paintings and stuff that we've been covering in Strange Happenings. Yeah. So it's like human beings back then should not have had this ability artistically.
Yeah.
Where they thought maybe it was Neanderthals, but now they think some of these cave drawings are actually Homo sapiens sapien, where we shouldn't have even been in the record books back then. So all these timelines are getting pushed back.
Yeah.
And I think you were talking about these footprints and stuff, and some of the datings that they have and theories that people have around whether it's these giant footprints in South America that have gone viral, and a lot of people said those are fake. Michael Tellinger has that enormous, huge footprint that's in that rock that's really, really
supposed famous. To be like 6 million years old.
Yeah, and it's just like, wait a minute, what's that?
Right.
Isn't it? I had never heard about that until last week, and I've put it in my bookmarks. That's pretty curious. I'll be going to South America, hopefully here in the next year or so. So, yeah, it's a pretty good segue to Hueyatlaco if you all want to talk about that, because the peopling of the Americas. Graham Hancock is who really kind of opened my eyes to this. I heard about Hueyatlaco through Graham Hancock's book. And then also Dr. Little, when I was going down to Piedras Negras, he had mentioned Hueyatlaco. And so I did a deep dive. There's like and there's not much information out there. I had to do some serious sleuthing to like find out what I did about Hueyatlaco to even find the spot. I like used Google Earth. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, let's start off from the beginning. The idea of the peopling of Americans, first of all, the conventional history and the archaeological record doesn't believe that there was even like Neanderthals in the Americas, right? That Homo sapiens were the first people to get to this continent. And they think, and this has been pushed back, originally it used to be as much as like 5,000 years ago. Okay, well, that's not correct. They found out that wasn't correct pretty soon. So then it was 10,000. Eventually, people kind of settled around between 14 and 16,000, right? Now you got these New Mexico footprints that are coming out, which we'll talk about in a second. That's at minimum. You always hear 20,000 with those. That's at minimum. Those could likely be very much older than 20,000 years old. Well, you got places like Hueyatlaco that are a bit of an enigma. So Hueyatlaco is this site here you're looking at. This is a drone shot that I took at the spot in Puebla. And on the right side is where a man named, sorry for a second, his name is escaping me. But there was a man that found this artifact down there that is likely the oldest piece of artwork that has ever been discovered in the Americas. I don't know if you have the photo of the bone that's been carved with some of the.
Did I go too far? Am I going?
Went to a little too far.
Okay, I'm going the wrong direction.
There we go. And then there's one other photo that's a little better right there. Yeah.
Okay.
So this thing, and I want to get his name right. So I'm going to also kind of multitask here while I look through my book.
You're good.
This thing right here, he kind of keeps secret for a while because he realizes this is a gigantic discovery. This is on, I believe, a mastodon hip.
Oh my. And
you see there are Ice Age animals within that picture. And he starts to say, oh boy, this is going to be controversial because I know this is old. This is pretty old. And now this isn't 250,000 years old. This is just how like the rabbit hole starts. Anyways, the man, his name is, real quick, sorry, everybody. I just want to give credit. Okay. Well, anyways, I apologize for the dead air there.
You're good.
I'll just keep going.
You're good.
He finally tells archaeologists that he's friends with in America about this, including a lady named Dr. Hannah Wormington. And she was like, one of the best, is about to retire. And she had a protege named Cynthia Irwin Williams. And they go down there, and eventually this thing starts getting pressed. Like, this is a genuine discovery. They find it's called green bone, which means that this was carved soon after the animal died. Like, if you carve onto a bone, it's very evident in like the record, basically. And so, anyways, this artifact that you're looking at right here, just to kind of fast forward a little bit, the Smithsonian gets involved. At some point they have, get ready. It's missing. No one knows where this thing is.
Come on.
Of course.
The Smithsonian gets involved. I don't know if they actually were the last ones to have possession of it. That wasn't clear to me. I just know at one point it was displayed there. There was magazine covers, and no one, according to the documentary I watched in this book, Christopher Hardiker's book, he's passed away since, rest in peace, Christopher Hardiker, but his book, The First American, says that this is missing. No one knows where this is. This might be the oldest artistic artifact in America, and no one knows where it's at. Okay. So anyways, this was just the entry to Hueyatlaco. And this causes a whole bunch of interest in the site. And Cynthia Irwin Williams, the protege of Hannah Marie Wormington, that a lot of people saying she's a rock star, she's like the next big name in archaeology. She goes down there with the team. They start excavating, and they start finding artifacts. They go a little deeper. They find more artifacts. They go a little deeper. They're finding these obviously chipped human-made artifacts. Very clear. No one debates that the artifacts are genuine. Like, the artifacts are real. And so she's taking records of the geological layers that they're found in. Bed B, bed C, bed D, bed E, bed F, eventually bed I, all these different layers. And they start sending samples to geologists for radiocarbon dating. And they start coming back with pretty unbelievable years, 40,000 years, 50,000 years. Okay, this is obviously wrong, right? This can't be. At this point, this is like the 1960s. So like they don't even, she was hesitant to even publish this. Little did she know, and the documentary does a good job of talking about this, and I have my own video on this too. That was like the least of her worries. Eventually, some more samples are sent. Radiocarbon datings get even better, the technology for this. And they start coming up with ages of like 250,000 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so at this point, the word kind of starts to get out. And this is why I call this the biggest archaeological cover up and conspiracy of all time, because it actually is a proven conspiracy. And there was the director of the museum in Mexico City, the Mexican museum, basically like the national museum there. They were allowing the excavation to happen as long as they could keep the artifacts. And he decides he's shutting this down. He sends men with guns, actual men with guns, like federales down there, to shut down the operation, bans Cynthia Irwin Williams from excavating from the site. And all of a sudden, this thing gets memory hold real quick. The artifacts themselves go missing. Luckily, there was some duplicates made, and there was also photos of them that are out there on the internet and in Christopher Hardaker's book. Well, so this all gets kind of covered up. 250,000 years, there's no way. Decades later, basically the U.S. Geological Survey decides, hey, I'd like to go take another look. We're talking about real PhD, like real scientists that go down there. And they go and do another radiocarbon dating on the exact layer that she says she found these. And we're talking about a competent archaeologist here. No one disagreed with her competency. Even the Christopher Hardaker in his book talks about even the guy that ran the Mexican Museum wasn't necessarily saying she got the information wrong. He believes that she didn't realize that these were planted by her workers somewhere. And so, long story short, the Geological Survey ends up doing multiple radiocarbon datings, and the dates get older. 50,000 years is the minimum at this point. It goes all the way up to like over 500,000 years on like between when these artifacts were created, if the layer they were found in is the layer they were found in. Now, there's another scientist that believes that she did make a mistake, and he has his reasons why. And he basically thinks that she got an erosion area where some different beds were mixed up. Hardaker pushes back on this in the book, and he has his reasons for that. But about the footprints, this is the most speculative part, and this is where I like put my Indiana Jones hat on, and I went and found these things. In the early 2000s, when this team went back there to Hueyatlaco, there was reports that there might be footprints in a layer of ash that was 1.3 million years old down there. And there's a photo in Hardaker's book that I put in here where he shows this photo. And, that's the supposed footprint right there. They were all unsure. They weren't really sure whether this was a footprint or not. They took these photos that aren't in color. And so I decided to I used Google Earth. I don't know how I found this thing. I can't even remember how I found the site. I just know I used Google Earth and I pinpointed it down and I went there. It's an old like abandoned quarry or like mine. And I went and found the supposed footprints and took my own photos. And it's hard to say. You can see the outline of them. I don't know if you want to go to mine, the ones that I took here. I believe that photo on the left, the big one, is the exact same photo that Hardaker had in his book. I'm not exactly sure. But, a lot of people, if you look this up on the internet, a lot of people say it's been debunked, but it's really the reason that the archaeologist who debunked this, or I think it was a geologist, the reason given is because, we have no evidence of humans in the area at that time. it's not because like they analyzed this and determined that they weren't footprints. It's because of the historical narrative that currently exists. Now,
well, what would be left after a million years?
It's
what
just
would
exclusion.
be left if it's a million years? What would be left? Pot shards. Exclusion. You're not going to have any evidence. Wood's going to be gone. Building structures. What would be left other than fossils or something that's mineral based, like these footprints? I don't know.
Like, and if you go to Mexico footprint, that's a good point that you just made there, Mikey, because so if the New Mexico footprints are 20,000 years old, these Huehuetlacua ones are 60 times older, right? And you can see, the New Mexico footprints aren't exactly fresh, like they've eroded some as well. And then you have these right here that are supposedly on a layer, according to Christopher Hardiker, who was a PhD archaeologist that was 1.3 million years old. And so I went out there and took these photos and put it in a little documentary. I have a documentary about this called The Cover Up at Huehuetlacua.
Nice.
And it's on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. I went and talked to locals. They remembered Cynthia. They called her La Gringa. As soon as I had a translator with me, as soon as she said Cynthia, they started saying La Gringa, La Gringa. And but they still had a memory of her. And I talked to this old man right where the artifacts were discovered. And he said that on camera to me, he said he found more mastodon bones and like tusks. And some guy came and wanted them. And so he gave them to him. And I just like, oh no, man, you just gave away a treasure. Those are worth so much money. And I didn't have the heart to tell him, but apparently he was just giving bones away.
Oh God.
I'm sure there's more on his land. Like he needs to go dig them up. But
someone's got. Yeah.
Those are very expensive.
Man.
Anyways, I've been rambling about this topic because it's an exciting one. It's one rabbit hole that I went down, but here you can see these are the New Mexico footprints. Now I want to ask you a question here. Do you all notice anything peculiar about these footprints?
The toes.
6 toes, right?
Toes on those right there.
6.
Yep, there's 6 toes. And this is another chapter in my book. You can find petroglyphs of all over the American Southwest of 6 fingers and 6 toes. And not just the Southwest, North Carolina has one with 7 fingers that's associated with the legend of a giant named Judacola out there. It's at Judacola Rock.
Either 6 toe or a 6 toe or a huge bunion, man. I don't know what's going on there.
That's what you get for hiking around in the desert, bud.
Sure. Chaco Canyon and the walls at Chaco Canyon, they had stamped a footprint at one point that had 6 toes. Apparently this was relatively common. It's actually not the most uncommon thing throughout all cultures. It's called polydactyly. It happens.
Yep.
It's a genetic condition. But it did happen at apparently a higher rate in the American Southwest during the time of the Anasazi. And it's really interesting. If you go out to Petroglyph National Monument in Albuquerque, if you see a handprint, count the fingers. I wasn't even expecting to find 6-fingered petroglyphs out there. I was out there looking for these Chinese petroglyphs, and I looked at them and I started counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been to the Petroglyph Park on the outskirts of New Mexico, Albuquerque.
Yep.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's some interesting ones there. I myself have been to Chaco Canyon. Me and my wife went during the annular solar eclipse in 2012. Met Dr. Kim Malville, who's the resident archaeoastronomer. He's the guy that built the observatory out there. And he got interested in Vedic astronomy and astrology and quit his career as an astrobiologist and became an archaeoastronomer. But he was out there forever out there at Chaco Canyon rediscovering all the alignments, the winter solstice alignment with Fajada Butte. Fajada Butte is right in the center of where the sun and this whole canyon, and there's this beautiful butte that seems to be the center of all of their alignments. Basically using that as a point on the horizon to calculate all these different measurements. And that's just at Pueblo Bonito, the main it's 80,000 square feet. It's multiple stories, and you got to climb up the ancient riverbed, the waterfall, to get up top to really look down on these places and go. Because when you're walking around on the ground, you're just like, oh, cool, walls, buildings. You got all these cool doorways and windows that don't make sense, and the kivas with the circular structures. You get above that thing, and it just absolutely blows your mind. And you see all the petroglyphs up there completely untouched, and it's just wild.
The Anasazi might be my favorite ancient culture when it comes to like the underdog, you know, when you think about the Americas in general, like the Inca, all the cultures, the Anasazi were just as capable as astronomers as any of the other ancient cultures. If you don't mind, I'll tell you about another chapter in my book. This one's weird. It's called Anasazi Astronomers and the Silicon Valley Bank Collapse. The moon and the stars control the economy. And I have a video about this. It kind of like went, I don't want to say it went viral. It got like a lot of views on Twitter because there's a big account that retweeted it, but it's happening right now. So at Chimney Rock, have you been there? Are you all familiar with Chimney Rock, Colorado?
I haven't been there. I'm familiar with it.
I don't know if it's possible to pull an image up of it, but it's this incredible spot that has these two pillars of rock that are gigantic, and you have a great house, Kiva, that is built on a ledge high up in the Rockies. This is like kind of an anomaly for the Anasazi. It's like the furthest northeastern part of the Chacoan Empire. And it is, so with the Anasazi, you have the main culture there, but the Chacoan part of that culture was kind of like the dominant, you know, building force. You see this at like Aztec ruins, and you see this in Chaco Canyon. The building style is different than like maybe Southeast Utah. Well, these are Chacoan like buildings in it's near Pagosa Springs, Colorado, and it's called Chimney Rock. And they were trying to think, how did they build this up here, and why did they build this up here is the most important question. What was the reason? Like, it's kind of an arid spot in a very high elevation place. There's not a lot of water around. You know, what's going on here? And they started digging around, and they realized that there was two major building efforts that were 18 years apart from each other. And after doing some calculations, another astronomist, and I really isn't an archaeologist that understands archaeoastronomy, and I wish I had his name off the top of my head. I'll send it to you all. Maybe you all can like put it in the description for me or something. He made a prediction that during the lunar standstill that happens every 18.6 years, that you would see from the Great House vantage point a full moon rising between the two pillars at Chimney Rock, Colorado, every 18.6 years through these different periods of time. Like right now, we're actually in it. We're in the lunar standstill. It's going to happen from now up until the 2025. The last one was in 2007. Okay, well, this is where this gets interesting. There's a man named, like, why would they do that? What's up with the 18.6 year cycle? Some people think maybe they thought it had something to do with like a boom and bust crop cycle. Well, there's a man named W.D. Gann back in the early 1900s that basically created what he called a financial timetable. And he used this to predict boom and busts in the stock markets. And his bust moments always happen during these 18.6 year lunar standstill cycles. What happened in 2007 during the last lunar standstill?
Right before the subprime mortgage collapse. That was 2007 was the mortgages that led into the full collapse in 2008.
Correct. And then in 89, I believe in 89, you had one of those years you had the Asian financial crisis, right? And so he was able to predict the Great Depression with this. He was able to predict, if you extrapolate the chart out using his model, which people have done, people are like crazy about this. There are financial gurus out there that use this. Do you all know who Ray Dalio is?
I know the name.
Ray Dalio's like, he's like considered like the Michael Jordan of like big time value investing, even more than like I guess you could say Warren Buffett these days. He doesn't fully admit to using this. He calls it his 18-year credit debt cycle. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. And as 2023 approached and we entered the lunar standstill, the cracks started cracking, baby. And look what happened to the Silicon Valley Bank. And I'm not making any predictions. I am not a financial advisor. And who knows? Here's the other thing. Finance, things can roll out in different ways. It could be maybe a dollar devaluation, or it can be a stock market collapse. Those are two opposite things. So you never want to make your bets based on some like astrology. Like, you really should do your own research. And that's not what I'm trying to tell you here. I'm just telling you that there's a very curious anomaly it seems to be happening with people following this 18.6 year basically lunar standstill cycle with the WD Gann, if you look them up, based on how they play their bets in the stock market or the commodity markets, versus the ancients looking at this exact same cycle. The same thing in Poverty Point. They tracked the lunar standstill at Poverty Point. They did it at Cahokia, I believe. All these sites you can find this, but Chimney Rock, Colorado is the most radical because this full moon, there's one picture of it on the internet. Somebody took a picture back in 2007. This full moon is just rising between the pillars right at the Great House. And so,
Incredible.
You know.
Are you aware of the Great Octagon in Newark? I don't know when you were in Ohio, if you got a chance to see the Great Octagon in Newark, Ohio.
No, but I'm there. Tell me about that.
So we have two 18.6 year lunar calendars here in Ohio. One is Serpent Mound is one, and then the more well-known is the Great Octagon, which is a part of the Newark earthwork, which is a circle, square, and octagon structure that's all one big giant site that takes up the whole city of Newark and Heath combined. And it is the largest earthwork complex in all of other than Cahokia in terms of how spread out it is. They used to have the Ohio State Fair inside the Great Circle, but the Octagon currently is a golf resort. So it's a country club that's been there operating as a country club for basically 100 and some years. And recently, the Ohio History Connection has won the battle to take that land back and to essentially force the lease away from the country club. But the reason why the Octagon's still there is because the country club has protected it. So without that country club, people want to talk a lot of shit about, oh, well, it's a golf course. That's, ancient culture. But if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have the Octagon, 100%. And there's a platform that you can sit where, maybe the shaman or the astronomer would sit, and they're tracking these lunar cycles, the northernmost moon rise, the northernmost moon set, and then the whole calendar system ends at 18.6 years, where the full moon, like what you're saying, arises right down the barrel of the Octagon in a specific spot where you're on this platform. And it is ridiculously advanced. And all of the earthwork scholars in Ohio actually agree that this is an 18.6 year lunar calendar in the form of an octagon. And it's massive, dude. If you're ever back here in Ohio, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, and that's the one with the big circle around it, correct? Like the circular wall, I guess, or moat.
So there is a big circle, which is part of the Newark earthwork, but this is actually an octagon shape completely. As far as like there's walls on the outside, which I think are like avenues or causeways that connect the Great Circle to the octagon, and then also there's a square. And then there's another causeway that goes from the octagon to the square and vice versa. But yes, it is absolutely incredible. And how in Ohio, it seems like people, they were obsessed with the moon primarily. Unlike the Mayans and the Aztecs, they were and the Egyptians were very focused on the sun, which Serpent Mound has both the sun and lunar alignments. So that kind of brings both of them together, which is why that place is so unique. But yeah, it's wild.
That is wild. I want to go there. I want to check that out. It's the whole thing when you're like talking about Chimney Rock or all this, it makes me kind of step back and realize that like, if all this is true, like especially since we're still apparently tracking this, like there are a lot of people that do, I don't know if you know what like technical analysis is on like when you're looking at stock charts.
Oh yeah.
You got Bob's interest here.
I love stocks. I'm not great with them, but I love watching them. TA baby.
Form of modern day astrology in many ways, right? Like you're watching the ebbs and flows of human behavior in a way, correct? Right. And so that's kind of what that is. And I am not an astrologist. I am like an elementary level, like on like astrology and all that stuff. I don't even know. I'm like a Sagittarius, and I don't know if I'm rising or following or whatever. I don't know all that. But all I know is when I look at this and I think, I've watched the dramatic tide changes out in Thailand when I was visiting Thailand, and I've watched what the moon can do there. Like we're 75% water. I'm sure these cycles have some effect on human behavior. And so if that's the case on like a micro level, then it probably is on a macro level too. And the more I look at it, I don't know if you all have ever heard of like the fourth turning. I've gone down that rabbit hole. That would be a wonderful like rabbit hole for y'all to go down. It's another cycle. It's called Generation Theory by Neil Howe and William Strauss, I believe. They were two psychologists. And it's basically this idea that like a lot of this stuff is out of our control.
Sure.
We go through cycles, and like people say, well, how did we know that? Because we're in the fourth turning right now. This is like the end of a cycle where like things unravel and, pandemics, all these things happen. How does that make a pandemic happen? It's not necessarily that it makes a pandemic happen. Pandemics always are kind of happening, but it's more so how does the public react to it during whatever cycle you're in? A lot of people don't know, and I don't want to get into like COVID and all that stuff, but like a lot of people don't know that like the Hong Kong flu happened here in America, and I think it killed, somebody can fact check me if I'm wrong, I think it killed like 1 million Americans. But like it was maybe during a time where like things were pretty chill. And so it didn't like, it didn't resonate with the public. Now we're in this time of like unraveling is the big theme on the fourth turning. And the last fourth turning, of course, was World War II. And the first being right afterwards. These things happen in like 85-year cycles. And the more I look into these ancient cultures that study the same stuff, it just kind of makes me wonder if like we're all just like floating in the river with our feet up and there's not much we can do. Yeah. Doesn't really matter who's
Absolutely.
in office. I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but it just feels that way.
Have you looked into the Yuga system, the Vedic? The ancient Hindus and the Vedics talk about the yugas. Like right now we're in the Kali Yuga, which is the final, and these are huge expanse of time where they're calculating these massive cycles of time, not just 18.6 years, but these very, very, very long and series of time, which, essentially they're tracking comets, impacts, and earthquakes and things that kind of happen at the beginning and then at the end of these cycles, that humanity goes through these changes during these periods of time. And right now, we're in the Kali Yuga, the final Yuga. And, according to the ancient Vedics, it's a time of change. It's a time of shifting. And then obviously the Mayan have their long calendar and their systems of tracking these enormous, like we think from year to year to year that we're just going around the sun. And these ancient people are tracking just unbelievable.
Different time scales. Yeah, they're not using the same calendar we are.
No.
For good reason,
But why was that so important to them?
Because they're looking at skylines. They're looking at celestial movements. They're we measure our position by our own thoughts of like it's Justin and today's Monday or today's Saturday. They're looking at it like, hey, we're on this planet and our position in the freaking galaxy and the Milky Way is here. Not this is, so-and-so chief of whatever tribe back in the day, and tomorrow's Tuesday and I got to go slay a buffalo and get some fish. Like, they were contemplating much, much bigger things. They were watching wheels of time turning across galaxies. We don't do that anymore. We don't think about stuff that way anymore.
We live in cities and we wear shoes and we're not connected to the earth. We're not connected to the sky.
Think about how we're like on this giant, spaceship flying through space. That's what the earth is. Like, it's a giant spaceship, basically.
They were tripping too. They were tripping.
There you go.
Bingo.
There you go.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. The Hopi have a similar thing, right? The four worlds.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how similar that is to the Vedic. You always hear about like the Dalai Lama like visits Taos, New Mexico and stuff like that. Like, what's up? I wonder if there's some weird connection there. So
yeah, our friend VJ's been on the show a bunch of times. We've already told this story, and you can go back and watch our episodes with VJ. You might find it interesting, but he, came to Ohio lived in Cincinnati to just work and connect into American culture, and kind of wasn't thinking about lost civilizations or even his background as and where he's from in Tamil Nadu. Comes to Ohio, visits Serpent Mound, and totally gets blown away, had no clue that these ancient sites were in America, and essentially starts to research and tap into these places and realizes that maybe Serpent Mound is a temple to the Kundalini yoga system, the 7 chakras, and that this could be almost like a temple. It's almost like what they find in these ancient places in India, and kind of then looking into words that are similar to Native Americans in America and other places, and just kind of goes down this rabbit hole, and has been in India now talking about these connections with Ohio and the ancient Tamil people in America. So...
Well, and then you look at like the Zuni their linguistic connection to Japan.
Yep.
There's about it called the Zuni Enigma. I quote it in my book. There's some unbelievable connections there. And does Ross Hamilton talk about some of that in his books about Serpent Mound? Yeah. I have his book.
Ross talks a lot about like the Manitoba civilizations, where Ohio was kind of like the heart or the center of, or like the third eye, if you will, of this greater advanced Manitoba civilization that existed thousands of years ago. And kind of, that's where we have these stories of the giants it's kind of an outpost, if you will, of these much more ancient cultures, if you want to call them Atlantis or Lemuria. But these grand Manitoba societies that lived in North America, that we just don't have any, proof of, essentially. But Ross has worked with archaeoastronomy, and kind of how he ties some of this stuff together with the earthworks. It's fascinating stuff.
The constellation Draco, and did you all know that there's a Serpent Mound in Kansas, where I'm from?
Yes, and Chicago. Jeffrey actually talked about it.
Apparently, there's quite a few Serpent Mound effigies, and there's actually some intaglios, depressions, like you reverse, like almost like that footprint, but a dug out version of the Serpent Mound.
So the one in Kansas is interesting because if you can look at this up too, I think just Google Serpent Mound, Kansas. It has the same egg, right? Like the same jaw surrounding the egg. What they did is they just filled it with lime. Like they just filled it with a whole bunch of lime, and there's an aerial photograph of it. And blew my mind. It's on private property. I don't know how I could find it. It's out in near Lyons, Kansas. And I've been trying to, if the owner's listening to this out there in the internet, holler at me. I would love to like go fly a drone out there if you'd let me, but only with your permission.
Yeah. Well, hey man, the next time you're out in the Verde Valley or in the and you're in the Southwest, head to V-Bar V Heritage Site. I think you would find that place fascinating. It's a pre-Hopi site that was on a ranch for years and years. It was operated as a ranch, but they have a whole wall of these amazing petroglyphs, and there's actually a serpent petroglyph out there that recently they found out is a solstice calendar. Tracks the winter solstice, summer solstice, and the equinoxes by shadow play on this petroglyph, where it uses a jagged rock to kind of mark the solstice marker that casts onto the petroglyph and gives you that effect. And it goes all the way through the equinox and solstice, but that's something they had just found out. The park rangers had no clue. I asked them if they had ever heard about Serpent Mound because, hey, we have this thing in Ohio that tracks all these solstices and equinoxes. You guys have this petroglyph. They had no clue, had never heard of Serpent Mound. But why is this petroglyph basically doing the same thing as this giant earthwork in Ohio? It's just wild, dude.
It's almost like, it's you almost wonder, like some of it is probably diffusion and some of it might be isolation. And sometimes people don't like to hear the isolationist view because they think it's boring. But actually, I think it's the most intriguing one. Like, why are we evolving the same way separately across continents, right? There's probably some diffusion involved as well, right? But it's so interesting. I haven't been to V-Bar Ranch, but I've been right next door to Red Tank Draw, which is another place that's just amazing. And there are serpents all over that wall out there. There's actually a really interesting petroglyph. I don't know if this is like PG-13 or what, but there's a lot of like animals copulating out there, like clearly, having fun out there. And that's at Red Tank Draw, really interesting site. That's right next to Sacred Mountain. Have you ever heard of Sacred Mountain before out there? That's a pretty cool spot that not a lot of people know about. There's Pueblo and ruins that have never been restored and probably haven't really even been excavated, as well as a ball field, like a Mesoamerican style ball field.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think we were going to go to that, but the day that we came into town, it was already closed or was closed for, like, it's not open every single day. I remember looking into that one, and then we ended up going to V-Bar V, I think, instead. But we went to Montezuma as well, V-Bar V, and, hiked over a couple different vortexes, those kind of sites and stuff like that. But I would love to get back. The Verde Valley is so mysterious. There's so much stuff to explore. It blows your mind.
It's beautiful this time of the year. This is like when it rains down there. I was there 2 years ago today, and wow, incredible. I love that spot. Yeah, Dr. Little was telling me a little bit about a friend he has that's been doing researches on those vortexes. He basically takes these devices that measure, and sorry, Dr. Little, if I'm getting this wrong, but measure, like, I guess, gravitational anomalies.
Yep.
And he would find areas that had this, and then nearby there'd be another area. And he almost wondered if, like, they were like sucking in energy from each other or something, hence the name vortex. I'm sure that's a very elementary level understanding of it. I haven't gone down the vortex rabbit hole too much. Bought a book on it out at a bookstore there. I just haven't got to it yet.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. We had a tour in 2010 that Bub and I did with a gentleman, Kevin Two Flutes. Still trying to find you, brother. If you're listening,
Kevin, if you're out there,
Jeep tour guide, please hit us up. We would love to talk to you, brother. But one day we will reconnect with
Kevin.
Find
him. I'm sure he's out there.
He taught us how to kind of connect with the energy. And Bub was very, very skeptical. And I was just kind of open, like, hey, I heard about these vortexes. We're going through Sedona. Let's see if we can't figure out if this is real, or let's see what it's about. And you were very skeptical.
I don't even know if we were watching like Ancient Aliens at that time. Like if that stuff was even out. Like that was, I mean, this was quite a while ago.
It was early YouTube.
So yeah, we were definitely a little bit skeptical. I was, at least.
Yeah, I was open-minded.
But it was a great trip. And he had a lot of stuff that, still to this day makes sense and is even more enforced by time. you know?
He had a scientific view, but then also had the indigenous view.
Yeah.
So we got kind of the both sides of the story, which was awesome, and how he kind of connected everything in. But it was the first time that we kind of did a little ceremony up there for us.
Yep.
Smudged us, did some spirit wheel card reading.
Beautiful area.
And yeah, it was.
I'd like to go back out there.
Yeah. Kevin, we're looking for you, buddy. Well, Will, this has been absolutely incredible.
As the name
incredible
states,
history.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
The Incredibly Strange Road.
That's a good title for the episode. Man, we love what you're doing. We really do, and I'm so happy. It's funny because we're chatting in the comments on YouTube, and then you and Bub are talking to each other separate on Twitter, and I'm like, I think we need to have this guy on. And
Mike's like, we got to get this
Bub's,
guy.
I've already been talking to him. But he's writing this book, and after the book comes out, we'll get it lined up.
Yep.
So,
which is, like I said, is great. That's awesome. I'd love to be able to have those touch points and check in with people. Like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
You're not ready right now? Hey, well, in the future, when you're ready to, come back. Like, let us know what you do, what you're into. And it just helped. Like, again, you might go off and knock out another project and be like, hey, I'd like to come back on, or whatever it is. Like, we're not opposed to that either, because we've only scratched the surface with, your book even,
Yeah.
There's still a lot to discuss, but we can only pack so much into a podcast.
Some for if you guys want to check out the book.
Oh, I definitely
all the links are in the description. Before we let you go, I do want to ask you, what do you know about the Newark Holy Stones? Has that been on your radar at all, as far as out of place artifacts?
Yeah, the only reason it's been on my radar is because, and I don't know a lot about it, but I've seen Dr. Gregory Little tweet some fascinating photographs of them. So that for the Newark Holy Stones, I actually don't have an opinion on those because I haven't done a deep dive. Not to change the subject on you, I did just release a TikTok this morning on the Bat Creek Stone.
Oh,
and my on that, and we can talk about that real quick if you want.
Dude, I love the Bat Creek Stone story personally. It's wild.
When I say analysis, I just mean my opinion, I guess. So I'm kind of a fence sitter on it, but here's what I know. So, and here's how you can think about it. So this thing was found, and when it was discovered, they believed that it was Cherokee syllabary. Cherokee syllabary is like a writing system that was developed, hundreds of years ago by the Cherokee. And this was the narrative for a long time. So this is where I get, when people call it a hoax, I have a problem with it. It wasn't a very well advertised hoax, because it wasn't until the 1970s, a century later, that they turned this thing upside down and they go, oh, it's Hebrew. And no one questions whether it's Hebrew. That's no one actually questions that. Everybody agrees. Yeah, this is Hebrew, and it says for the Judeans. There have been multiple Hebrew scholars that have confirmed that. You can read about that in the book, or I'll make an episode on it. I think coming up here pretty soon. Within the next couple of weeks, that episode will be out. So for the Judeans. Well, there were two archaeologists, and I think this is great that they did this because they have a point that came out. It was Quas, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the last name, but they found an 1870s Masonic reference book that does have some very similar characters, Hebrew characters, in kind of some similar orders as well. But there was an economics professor from the University of Ohio named Professor McCulloch. He responded to this and basically, he, in his opinion, I think, tore it apart a little bit and said, hey, these are not exact. There are some really curious things in here. Basically, this just proves the point that they should have known back then even that this wasn't Cherokee, this was Hebrew, because these things were around. This Masonic reference book was around. So was it possible that there was knowledge of what ancient Hebrew even looked like in the area? Yes, because this reference book did exist in the 1870s. However, like most things, you almost always hear with these things is, oh, it was this person that was trying to prank their superior, or they were trying to prank their professor, whatever, that's always kind of the idea behind it. And that's not a bad idea. I'm sure that happened before. With this one in particular, if that happened, it was not very well advertised because they thought it was Cherokee. To my knowledge, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, no one ever declared that these might be Hebrew until the 1970s. That's when it all happened, long after everyone had died. So if it was a hoax, it wasn't a very well advertised hoax, and it's definitely Hebrew. But when was it created? Was it created in the 1800s? That's up for you all to decide. So,
well, Scott Walter did an analysis on the geology, and what they'd found was a scratch that was on the right above the carving, or the inscription, if you will, that he basically analyzed in depth the scratch that was created, which they think was to be able to date it. Someone had made this scratch to kind of compare the inscription carving to what a modern.
Sure, you got to tell yeah.
So he was able to, and they don't know who did this, who made this scratch, but Scott Walter basically said, "Hey, this is great because I can tell you from what I've found that this scratch doesn't have age, but whatever this inscription is old." Not
right.
real sure. He couldn't tell you how old it was, but that it definitely didn't come from the 1870s of whenever it was found. It had to be much older because of the way that, after time, those inscriptions kind of start falling in on themselves and the edges really start to wear off.
Sure.
Whereas the newer scratch, you could see these sharp edges.
Oh, it's going to smooth over time, or it's going to erode a little bit. Not
whatever
erode,
you want to think
down.
about Scott Walter, but I think he's a pretty reputable forensic geologist, and he's got the H2 show, America Unearthed.
Nice.
Which he's very skeptical. I mean, there's a lot of things that he says is horseshit. He studied the Newark Holy Stones as well and said the same thing, that the inscriptions are old, that it's not it's not an artifact that someone faked in the 1800s, that it had to have been old. So whether or not it was faked or somebody had put it there as, who knows?
Well, and Will even said it earlier. Like, a lot of times what happens is you find this, and again, to the lady that was digging down, layer E, F, G, H, I, you're getting down on layer. Somebody didn't go down there and then like sneak in like some of these artifacts to screw with you. And there have been multiple reports like this. And I think we talked about it the other day in our call about, I'm a big Michael Cremo fan. If you know Michael Cremo, he's the same, that whole knowledge filtration, like, oh, here's this artifact or this incident where we find that we carbon date, or however we, geologically date it, that it's 1 million years old, or it's this. And people go, it can't be. It doesn't fit our model. Well, your model's broke then. Like, we need to include, what are all these pieces of data floating out here that are so far out of the mainstream conceptual idea that we can't even put them in? Like, they're there.
Exactly. And like, as for Scott Walter, like, people give him a lot of grief because like his show is like mysterious. His geology sound, like, the guy knows his geology. Like, it's his business, forensic geologist, and he's sound. And like I said, there's been more times than not, he goes, "Oh no, this is BS." And so, yeah, shout out Scott Walter. He must have uploaded a picture of the Back Creek Stone to Wikimedia Commons, which, Scott, thank you for doing that, because it's the best photo we have of that on the internet. And yeah, there's the one other thing that I forgot to mention, and it might be what Walter was talking about with that dash. Professor McCulloch makes note that there's a mandatory word divider that's often used in Hebrew that was used on the Back Creek Stone that was not in the reference book. As well as multiple other letters that weren't in the reference book. And in that video I made today, I compare them. I go back and forth between them so you can kind of decide for yourself. But yeah, as for the Newark Holy Stones, I haven't got to dive into that one yet, but the Back Creek Stone's really interesting. And I did that one in combination with the Los Lunas Decalogue Stone out in New Mexico, which I got a chance to go look at. And, a lot of people immediately call hoax on that one because it looks new. It's been scrubbed and chalked, though. Now, I think there's 4 possibilities on the Los Lunas Decalogue Stone. I know we're going to get off here pretty soon, but I'll just name them real quick. First possibility is that this was a hoax, right? First possibility is a hoax, maybe by Professor Hibbins, the guy that found it. I don't want to say him directly because that's unfair, but one of his students, is people said his students like to play pranks on him. Okay. I think that's unlikely if you actually go look at the inscription. It's pretty elaborate. And it's full of, it's not just Hebrew. Some people say it's not even Hebrew. It's like an Eastern, like almost Greek,
Phoenician.
You're getting even Phoenician. Like there's old Hebrew. It's a weird writing system. Okay. And for those that don't know about it, it's supposedly the 10 Commandments out in the New Mexico desert. Some people say, no, it's not the 10 Commandments. It's about a traveler in distress. That's a whole nother thing. But option number 2 is that this was created by a member of the Mormon battalion that marched through the area in the 1840s, possibly and I'm not picking on the Mormons here. I actually sympathize. This is going to get me in trouble. I sympathize with a lot of their historical beliefs. What if the lost tribes of Israel did make it to the Americas? We're talking about these things. Anyways, but I do think it's possible. I think it's been clearly, there's been Mormon hoaxes before. And when I say Mormon hoaxes, I'm talking about the individuals. I'm not talking about the overall people, lovely people. So it could have been done by a member of the Mormon battalion, which was the first all religious battalion and maybe the only one ever that existed in the United States Army and marched west. They went through the area, I believe, or just some Mormon settler in general, in an attempt to kind of strengthen that idea that the lost tribes of Israel or the Nephites came through the area. Okay. Option number 3, maybe they were the lost tribes of Israel, or maybe not even that, maybe just some random off chance got blown off course or something, found their way to New Mexico. I don't know. Maybe it is an old World Explorer. Option number 4 is my favorite. Crypto Spanish Jews. Okay. So crypto Spanish Jews were Jewish people that fled Spain in the Inquisition. A lot of them went to Mexico and New Mexico during the time of that era. And for 250 years, they had to keep their religion on the down low. Like the Inquisition, people don't know this, it lasted for centuries. Persecution of Jews, Muslims from Spain. And so these crypto Spanish Jews, there's an excellent book on crypto Spanish Jews. I say this and I'm forgetting the name, but it's about crypto Spanish Jews in the New Mexico area. And it was like the 1700s, 1800s, 19th, 18th century, kind of around the time that some people say there's oral histories of these being known about in the 1800s, right? The first documented sighting of it was in the 1900s by Professor Hibbins, but people said, no, we saw it before then. Hibbins claimed there was lichen growing between it, the grooves that had been there for a while. It's kind of interesting. It's in an angle. That's what some people think it's super old because it's in an angle. This rock is clearly eroded away. That also is why some people think it's a hoax. Some people think they did that on purpose. But, I don't know. I'm not saying it was the crypto Spanish Jews, but that's one option that you don't hear about a lot that I think kind of makes sense. There's apparently a lot of them, and still a lot of their descendants are still in the area. Really cool, fascinating history on the Jewish migration to New Mexico, if anybody wants to check it out.
Yeah, and it's really, really weird that you say that, because when I I found my biological family, and I basically Jewish DNA popped up in my Ancestry account, and I'm thinking, oh, it comes from my white mother. Well, no, it actually comes from my father, that his origins are from Zacatecas, Mexico. So my father's side has this Jewish DNA marker, along with Congolese, African, Spanish, Native American, Hopi, and it goes all the way up into New Mexico as well, where you kind of have those genetic communities with, of course, Irish and English. But my father had all this European DNA, Jewish DNA, Sardinian, Spanish, and basically just completely mixed Latino. But it's like I saw Jewish on there thinking, oh, that's got to be from my mother's side. No, from my Mexican father's side. Weird.
Yeah, and Zacatecas, right there in the central part, that's where it migrated to. It makes sense, man. It makes sense. And listen, on a lot of this, I'm showing you enthusiasm. I like this stuff where you can think outside of the box. If I seem a little too enthused, I apologize. I don't know on most of this. And that's what's most fun about this.
Right.
I still don't know a book about a lot of this stuff, and I don't know. So, some people don't like fin sitters. I'm kind of a fin sitter on a lot of this stuff. And, I think that's okay for stuff that's unexplainable. If you want to talk to people about it and tell a story, there's nothing wrong with conviction, but you got to have the proof needs to be in the pudding, right? And in a lot of this stuff, there's no pudding, right? There's just the stories and there's a little bit of it. There's like the crumbs. So I don't know on a lot of this, but those are some ideas. And I feel like we should be able to talk about those without people saying, I get comments every day, you shouldn't give this a platform. You shouldn't even talk about this. I have a completely different interpretation about that. There's a guy named Dr. Barry Fell. I don't know if you all are familiar with him. He was doing a lot of the translations of like the supposed Celtic Ogham and Old World scripts. And the guy gets a lot of grief. He's dead now. He was the president of Harvard's Epigraphic Society, but he gets a lot of grief for doing these petroglyph translations in Americas and having very like liberal translations like that are very specific. And my take on all that is, even if 95% of that is bullshit, if he got 5% correct on any of it, the history books have to be changed. So yeah, are there charlatans out there? Of course, but I think everybody needs to have a voice, and I think it's important to look at everyone's angle and all sides of the story, especially when someone like Portiniero is being accused of a hoax, because those are major accusations, and if there's not incredible evidence that shows that, then I believe the other side of the story needs to be told, no matter what. I don't care if it does platform some idea or whatever it is. The other side of the story needs to be heard. You all are grown adults. You all can decide for yourself once you hear both sides of the story.
Yep.
That's it. Will, incredible history.
Well put.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a way to wrap that up, man. This has been an incredible conversation. I mean, we always try to tell everybody we know jack squat, but we're always interested in learning more and asking questions. I'm still learning so much, and every time we do an episode, we learn from our guests.
Well, and the moment you think you know it all, that's when it's a problem.
Yeah.
The moment you think you've got it all understood, that's a problem. Like, you always got to be curious and you always got to be open.
Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
Send us off with some final words. Let us know where we can find you. Tell us, where we can find the book. Yeah. And, give us we'll send you off and we'll come back and have a chit chat after we do our outro. But final last words and where we can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, for sure. All my social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and even YouTube, my tag is @IncredHistory, INCRED history. My name, though, is Incredible History on there. That's just my tag. And on all my comments on my Twitter, in my bio, on my Twitter, Instagram, all that, my YouTube, you can find this book, Enigmatic North America, Legends, Oddities, and Controversial History. It's an awesome book. I got an ebook and paperback book. There's over 200 photos, but if you can't swing the purchase, no big deal. Go watch the episodes. I'm releasing each chapter for free as an episode every Friday. I released it on Saturday today. I had an editing error, but every week I'll release one episode for the next, 21 weeks, because there's 23 chapters and I've already released 2. Every day for the next 60 days, I'll be doing a TikTok, Instagram reel, and I'll be putting it on Twitter too, and a YouTube reel of each little individual section in here where we all can go down the rabbit hole in 1 minute. They're 1 minute videos. I try to have fun. And that's what this is. I'm just having fun. This is fun to me. So follow along, and thanks for having me on your podcast, guys. I'm a big fan of your channel. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Will. Will from Incredible History, everybody. Thanks again, Will. We'll be right back.
Fantastic.
Wow, what a great
fantastic
conversation.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, again.
Winning.
Yeah, again, just keeping this thing moving forward, switching it up, having these kind of conversations where, you know, I love meeting people that are pushing against the official narrative and able to admit, like, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I'm curious. I'm looking into this.
But you know what I see here is like it reminds me of like reading a David Hatcher Childress book or something of like getting out, doing it, finding it, researching it. Like
that was one of my big.
Because you know that it is. There's always the next wave. Like Von Daniken was Von Daniken, and then there was the next wave of him, and then there's DHC, and then there's Giorgio, but there's always going to be the next wave, right? And I'm not getting any younger, so like it's definitely not going to be me. But I think
Will's picking up the torch, and
I think we're starting to see that next wave of researchers. It's awesome.
I love it.
See the enthusiasm, the spark. Not to say the other guys aren't still doing their thing,
right?
But you know,
we got a lot of new blood in the ancient civilization world.
There's a lot of enthusiasm.
You know, a lot of people that you've been connecting with on Twitter, and you see a lot of people doing the Twitter Spaces. And,
or that's X a very popular. Yeah, it's a very popular.
Having these debates about history.
Yeah,
you know, having these kind of discussions is so important.
Yeah,
and you know, not digging in, not taking complete sides, but being just open to.
Well, we've also had
seeing a new picture.
We've had some that, you know, if we don't agree right away, they got a little sporty, and we had somebody. This was both. We won't even go into names here, but we had someone that we were considering bringing on at one point, and like it was like they basically told us how everything was, like how they knew, and we was like, whoa, okay, that's not the kind of conversation we're into, like.
No, it was basically like, I'm going to come on your show and debate you because you're wrong about. It was like, wait,
you're wrong about this.
We never said we were right or was trying to prove anything, or it's just fun things that we talk about.
That's when I saw ego, and I was just like, no, man, we're not about that. Like, if that's your ride, like you go for it, carve your own path, blaze on, young one, have at it. But that's not for me.
Right.
But anyhow, great conversation there. Can't wait to see that book. I need to get a copy of that book though, and I need to check out his weekly chapter updates. That's cool.
Exactly.
That's a great idea too.
Yep, absolutely.
Make it fun and interactive, and the quick deep dives on it. So good stuff.
So, guys, go check out Incredible History. Will's killing it.
Yep.
You can check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at The Strange Road. Go check out the Facebook group. You guys can support the show. We've got all of our links in the description. Will's links in the description, so be sure to check that out. Go follow Necromechanimal on Instagram. Check out all the post-show edits he does for us.
Yep. Crushing
it over there. Like, subscribe, share, follow wherever you are. We are signing out.
Stoner and Disbrow and Master Control working their butts off.
Disbrow, Master Control, one last shot. Wave to the camera, everybody.
Oh my gosh, it's hot in there right now.
All right, that door is flying open. Woo! 3, 2, 1, peace.
Later.